as we have one of our final Inspiration and Momentum events to support the NEST framework. I'm going to do some introductions a bit later, but we've got a really packed day. But I'm going to start with some housekeeping bits. So if you can turn off your microphones if you're not speaking, that's really helpful. We have not got any breaks today, but obviously if you need to take a break, then you know, work that out for yourselves. And we're hoping to stick to time, and we were very careful to try and organise this afternoon to fit in with the school run, so we're aware that people might be leaving. We do have a Mentimeter that Helen has sent out previously, and we're going to put in the chat as well, because we would really like to capture your views of how this afternoon's been. So if you can do that before you leave, that would be great. I'm really excited today about today. I think a rights-based approach and equity and diversity and inclusion are absolutely crucial to the NEST framework. And so it feels like we're kind of ending with perhaps one of the most important elements, because I think these are the building blocks for good mental health and well-being for all of us, and especially for children and young people, and particularly for children and young people from diverse backgrounds. I'm going to just start by sharing the NEST framework for those of you who haven't seen it, and even for those of you who have seen it before. If you could just watch it this time, but very much through the lens of equity, diversity and inclusion. Hopefully you can see that okay. I was the one person who didn't practice sharing my slides today. Okay, so I'm going to start by just playing our animation. And again, hopefully many of you will have seen this before, but if you haven't, I want you to particularly think about it through that lens. So Helen, I can see you on my screen. So once I start playing, if you could put a thumbs up if the volume's coming through, okay, that would be great.
A little bird has been spreading the word all about the NEST framework, a planning tool designed to help services make sure that mental health and well-being is at the heart of everything they do. It's for everyone: babies, children, young people, parents, carers, and their wider family and professionals, to make sure they feel supported and get extra help if needed. Time was taken to talk to lots of people and listen to their ideas. It was agreed that nests were a good way of explaining what helps children of all ages to grow strong, aim high, and be the best they can be. This happens when their everyday relationships feel nurturing, empowering, safe, and trusted. Everyone's nest is unique, made up of the people who are closest to them, the things they enjoy and help them grow, their communities, and the places they go to in their day-to-day lives. Trusted adults play a vital part in a young person's nest. They can lift them when they are sad, encourage them to try new things, help them join in with others, and make them feel valued and cared for. This is the everyday magic that builds and maintains positive mental health and well-being. The NEST framework aims to organize services so that more people get to experience this everyday magic in their daily lives. It also aims to help children and young people feel a sense of belonging, which is so important to mental health and well-being, whether that is at home, in school, at a club, with friends, or in their community. And when things aren't going well, like when a child or a young person is feeling sad, anxious, left out, or so angry that they push people away, the trusted adults who know them best will have access to support, giving them lots of ideas to try and the confidence to keep helping. That's because sometimes what a young person needs most is for trusted adults not to give up. NEST recognizes how important trusted adults are. When they are well supported, it can make all the difference. Sometimes, of course, extra help is needed, and the NEST framework's no wrong door approach recognizes that everyone is different and there should be lots of different types of help available. That way, all services come together to work out who can best meet the unique needs of each person. This makes sure children and families aren't bounced around services and gives access to the right help at the right time in the right way for them. We all need different kinds of help at different times along the way. The NEST framework aims to support children of all ages, parents, carers, their wider families, and the professionals who help them. It's about making sure everyone has opportunities that are nurturing, empowering, safe and trusted. Learn more about Nest today.
Okay, so just moving on here is just the framework on one page, if you like. There are 3 supporting documents to go with it. One is an accessible, easy read. One has a bit more detail, and then one goes into much more detail about the evidence base and the rationale and each of the different sections. I'm not going to talk about it today. We've got far too much to get through. But if you can see that in a ring, we start with a rights-based approach and equity, diversity and inclusion. And as I was saying earlier, they really are at the at the heart of the framework and at the heart of ensuring positive mental health and well-being for all of our children and families. So we've got 4 speakers today. I'm going to introduce each of them in turn, but we have got an opportunity for questions after each of them speak. So if you want to put some questions into the chat, Helen and I are going to be keeping an eye on that and making sure that we make sure our speakers are aware of the questions that we've got. But without further ado, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I'm going to introduce you to the Honourable Stuart Lawrence, who I'm really excited and absolutely thrilled is going to be presenting this afternoon. Stuart, your reputation precedes you, so I'm going to not say anything more and let you do your stuff.
Thank you very much, Liz. I do hope not to disappoint now. I really do. Good afternoon, everyone. It's so lovely to be here. And I just want to share with you my screen, a few presentation slides. And then please, as I said to people all the time, when I'm talking, please do populate the chat box with as many questions as you want. And let's hopefully, I won't witter on too much and I'll be able to get through some of those. 1 second, let's do this now. Okay, and then I come here. Here we go.
Brilliant.
Okay, cool. Hello, everyone. I won't try to speak in Welsh because I'll only embarrass myself. I put a little bit of Welsh there as well, hopefully to make everyone feel really welcome. I tell people all the time, though, that I start with this slide all the time. My parents are from Jamaica. My dad's from Kingston. My mum's from Clarendon. And I've brought up on sayings, anecdotes, quotes, analogies for everything. So I always like to start with this one about education being the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. And I always challenge people to say, well, with this newfound information, with this newfound knowledge, how are we going to go out there and make sure we affect the world to make it different? Because I believe this, as a starting point, I just wanted to ask this question. Do you feel like you're enough to change the world as an individual in the roles that you all have, in the positions that you all held? You know, as parents, as friends, as family members, are you enough to change the world? And I really want to challenge people and encourage people to have this mindset that you are enough to change the world and you can go out there and make a difference. And with that, what are we going to do to make sure the world is different? And who thought this morning as well? You know, again, we live in a world of consumerism, and we live in a world of these little devices that, you know, contain all our lives and consume us all the time. But who had the time this morning when they first woke up to believe that today would be the day that changed their life? You know, we as adults, as older people, we understand the fragility of life and how life is a fragile thing. And I always again challenge people to say this, you know, why not? Why could today not be the day that could do something different? You know, this is not going to happen tomorrow. You know, this is not going to happen any day soon, but the time that we have here together now could make a small difference in your life, or you may to pick up something that you could maybe share with someone else that can make a difference in someone else's life. And this is my last sort of question and challenge to start off with. You know, what would you do if you was given £7,200 every day on top of your wages that you earn, or on top of any other money that you get? You were just given this money every single day. What would you do and how would you spend it? I'd love to see some people's thoughts and questions inside the box there, inside the question. And usually when I have this question put up, people usually say things like, I'll give it to charity, I'd invest it, I'd just give some to my family and friends, etc., etc. But I want you to understand that this is the amount of seconds that we have today. this is the amount of time that we have today. We've got 2 hours on this topic that we're going to focus. And with that, and I really want to ask people to see time as a commodity and as value as money, because again, we're not going to have this time again together. And here I am, age 16. This was taken a few weeks after Stephen had passed here. And I tell people all the time, like my family, I was brought up in a quite a Christian, really strict family of understanding that, you know, you did good and you contributed and you gave more than you took away from life. And this is all based around my dad's work ethic. You know, he was self-employed, painter and decorator, worked 6 days a week. Just a person who I never saw anything other than just sternness and a real hard determination to succeed. And I suppose that's where I pick up my work ethic from now. You know, the only day I didn't see him work was Sundays. And that would be the only day when he'd work from 6 in the morning, and I wouldn't see him much. Would come home before any time, sort of before 4 o'clock. He would usually come home 6 o'clock onwards. And I want to share with you this story about how, as children, we one of the things that my dad really liked was ice cream, and we used to go to an ice cream parlour. So of a weekend, we used to go and spend. We had family over in North London. So on that drive from South East London to North London, we would stop at this ice cream parlour, and this ice cream parlour was like an Italian place, and it did the best ice creams. And I had such a memory of, you know, going there. But my dad would only buy maybe one, or sometimes if he was really lucky, 2 flavours. And I say to people all the time, like, we'd usually buy vanilla. That was usually the standard. He wasn't into these funny sort of flavours and different sort of variety things. And then sometimes we would buy a lemon ice flavour as well. And that were the 2 sort of go-to flavours. And I really want you to think about life a bit like this. Now, I hope again that everyone's having a little bit of chat about their favourite flavoured ice cream. Because for me, my favourite flavour is mint chocolate chip. But I also want you to look at what we're doing and how we're trying to present this new piece of work a bit like this. It's a bit like trying to be as bespoke as, you know, knowing everyone's unique flavour of ice cream, and sometimes a combination as well. You know, so I'm quite a mint chocolate chip and a sort of more of a classic sort of flavour. So again, I'd probably go chocolate or a vanilla after mint chocolate chip. But again, it's a very unique thing, isn't it? And then I've come to realise now, so that, you know, I asked myself this question: why is vanilla the most popular flavour of ice cream? You know, if you think about it now, whenever you go out somewhere and there's a dessert, and then their options are either custard, cream, or ice cream, 9 times out of 10, the flavour of ice cream is usually vanilla. Which got me thinking, why was that the most popular flavour though? Because surely that's not everyone just doesn't like vanilla. That cannot be the go-to point for everyone. And so I did some research and I sort of asked that question, like, why is vanilla the most important flavour? Like, why is it the most popular flavour? And it came down to this gentleman here. The reason why vanilla is the most popular flavour is because they say it's the most palate unoffensive, cleansing flavour. So it complements lots of other things. It doesn't overpower any other thing with it. So if you had apple pie and ice cream or apple crumble and ice cream, the vanilla doesn't overpower it. But then, you know, I was like, well, why is it most popular? And we found out that Edmund Albus here, this black gentleman, at age 12, invented a technique for pollinating vanilla orchids quickly and more profitably. And this technique revolutionized the way they cultivated vanilla. And I was just like, wow, look at that. Look at that as a small thing, but now such a major part that it plays. And before that thought that I had of who it was attached to, I never knew. And it goes back to sometimes the problems and issues that we now have, and we're now realizing about the single story narrative, and how the stories of those that we should really listen to don't always get heard. And that's what I really loved about this. And I always try to use my own personal experience for things. So after Stephen passed away, we was offered counselling. We was offered family counselling, which I found really uncomfortable. And I was offered individual counselling. But again, I was quite astute as a kid, and I could quite easily work out that what I had to say for adults to leave me alone. And then in the reflection of that now, did that really was that the best model and type for me? And it wasn't. I needed to find someone just to ask questions rather than tell me things. And for a lot of the first couple of years, that's exactly what happened with my interaction around providing the services that we're finding. Everyone was talking at me. And as a 16-year-old, I did know myself, and no one once asked me what they were providing if it was best suited for me. And one of the analogies that I heard when I had my pre-meeting for this was that the notion is that the way that the service should be provided for and offered is it should be as unique as everyone's fingerprint. Now, we've all got fingerprints, we all have, but they are all uniquely different. And that bespokeness of service, straight away in my mind, tells me that there's going to be a financial implication on this. And for an understanding of that to be not an issue or a problem or a way of not doing something is massive for me. And that's why I believe that moving forward with this process that you're about to undertake, the difference and the effects that it's going to have on young people's lives and on family life, on society, is going to be huge. And I always say to people, it's that whole thing about evolution, isn't it? And how we have to get better. And that's what's so empowering and so great to know about how Wales are going to be better. And I was saying to someone on that same call the other day that I'm really upset that, again, it seems to be splintered approach to certain things. There seems to be certain little groups that understand and can see how things need to be done better and are doing that. And there's other groups that stick in their head in the sand and say, oh, no, we've done this always this way. It's going to be fine. And that for me is such a detrimental way of looking at life, especially now that we're coming out of this pandemic, especially now that understanding around mental health and how that needs to be seen as something important is really key. Because for me, I say to people all the time, the question I throw out there all the time is, what's the most important part of your body? And if I ask my son, who's standing right next to me now, what's the most important part of my body, he'd probably say his feet or his legs, because he's a keen footballer. And someone that's really good with their hands, that likes drawing, probably say their arms and stuff. But I always say to people, all those things are made and attributed through your brain. So we should really see our brain as the most important part. And then that comes to that next part, isn't it? How fit are we? When I usually ask this question, automatically people think of physical health. How fast can you run up the stairs? How are you getting around life? But I really want people to start thinking about their mental health more and what we're doing to help develop it. I definitely want to put a caveat here and say now that I always say this: if you are struggling, if you are feeling like you're just not yourself, like there's something you just can't put your finger in it, please go and speak to someone. Go and find some help. Go and see what services that are offered out there for you to help you with this, because you know yourself better than anyone else. And I would encourage you all to ask yourself that question: how am I and how do I feel? And then really listen to yourself. And I say to people sometimes, I try to do that every day. I try to have 10 minutes to myself every day, where no mobile phones, no distraction, no noise. And some people might have this for prayer if you're religious. Some people go to yoga. Some people meditate. I just see it's super important to be able to take some time out from such a busy life and schedule that we all have and the way we live and do things. Because we do need to check on ourselves and to see if we're okay, because life has cycles that we goes in, where sometimes life is great and we're smashing things and we're reaching our targets and everything's going really easily. But there's other times where it doesn't go as well. And I just want people to know and understand that even though it doesn't feel like it's going as well, that life will never always be at the bottom. That it doesn't stay that way consistently. There will be times where you feel better and you move through that stage. So please stay with it. And we have to know that the brain will grow in whichever direction we want it to go in. And that's through neuroplasticity, which I found out through writing my book. You know, it's the ability to do something and afterwards review it, check the good points and bad points. And then if it didn't go so well, we can make the changes. Because surely, in the essence of all of us, we just want to be better. We want to develop, we want to move forward, we want to develop and grow. And by being able to do this, this should hopefully allow you to be a better person in the future. And if you do have religion, manifestation is just that belief that things will get better, things will change, things will improve. But if you don't, then just look at this as someone having an idea. That idea is then planned out for, executed, and then again, we go back to point number one again. Like if it doesn't quite work out, we have the ability to change and to move things around and just to tailor it slightly better so that we have better outcomes in the future. Because for me, the essence of life, what we talk to young people are always about is success versus failure and what that looks like and what is this. But as a small caveat to these young people, let's remind and remember that in our own lives as growing up, as developing, we would have made mistakes. Things wouldn't have always gone absolutely perfectly fine. And that's fine, because if you then take an attitude or a mindset of, that was just my first attempt in learning, that fail, you know, I can learn and develop and grow from this. This will not define me. This will not be the be all end all of life. Then again, that helps us move forward and be better in life. And this saying here comes from my mum. She always likes to round this one home to me. You know, having 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. And it's about the ability to be able to hear and listen to others, isn't it? And knowing and understanding the difference between listening and hearing. You know, I do believe when I was growing up, there was a lot of hearing going on. You know, a lot of people saying, you know, kids should be seen but not heard. Whereas now, you know, young people's voice and a young person's voice through services is a lot more important to be listened to. And listening, I say to people all the time, you have to know and understand that listening is a skill, and we all could get better at listening. You know, I'm in a room at the moment. There's air conditioning going on, and as well as my son trying to run around and do whatever he is. I'm not hearing that, and hopefully whatever distractions are going on, you're not hearing that. You're actually listening to what I'm now going to be just finishing up and saying, because that takes a process of you concentrating. So your brain will process the words, what I'm saying. Do you agree? Do you not agree? How does it relevant, and how does it affect you? And there are 4 different types of learning. And then for me, as I come towards the end now, which is, this is key. Empathy. Someone much more wiser than me said to me, Stuart, you do realise that empathy and people that are empathetic are the highest form of intelligent people we have on human earth. And I said to him, well, higher than scholars, higher than people, you know, spend their life and dedicate their life to one subject. He went, yeah. And it wasn't until I really thought about it, I really absorbed it and comprehended exactly what he was trying to say to me. And I say to people all the time, this example on your screen are 2 people in my life. One of them is my wife and one of them is me. And I usually get people to guess which is which. Because my wife has the ability of being able to think about what she wants to say to someone, what that person will then say back to her in return, what she then will say back to that person, what they say back to her, and she'll go back 3 or 4 times with this bounce effect where she'll go backwards and forwards, just to ensure that she's not upsetting or offending anyone. And I say to people all the time, I don't tend to do that too much. I do need to get better at that, and I do need to do more of that. So this example of my wife, which is on the left-hand side of your screen, which is this 7-layered multi roundabout, which is in Swindon, I found out the other day. This is my wife. You know, she can juggle so many different factors all at the same time, and for some strange reason, never crash and burn either. She seems to have everything floating along, and it all seems to go right. Whereas me, I'm simply nothing but a cross junction. You know, very simple. Yes or no, black or white. And I need to be more like my wife, more empathetic, more open to hearing and understanding from others. And that's my question to you today as well. How empathetic are you? How much do you, in your roles, in your profession, in your jobs that you do, how much are you listening to others, and in their response then doing something differently? Because, you know, this is my favorite saying, you know, hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. Now, this is something I ram home to my son all the time, because, you know, we all have something that we're particularly good at, or we have attributes at, but it doesn't mean that we should stop, we should rest on our laurels on that. No, I do believe that we should continue working and continue pushing ourselves forward and continue trying to be better, because surely then the better we become, the better services, the better outcomes we can then have for others. I'm going to miss that one because I'm running a little bit out of time. But yeah, and I sort of finish here with this picture here, and I like to tell this story all the time about Nelson, because for me, as empathetic, here is someone that's a classic example. Here is someone that we can really shine a light on and use as example for ourselves. So this is me with my mum and dad who met Nelson Mandela. This was 6 or 7 weeks after Stephen passed away, and where he came over to say thank you to the British public. I remember my mum always saying to me, "We're not buying South African products." As a child, I just think to myself, why are we not? But that was my mum's little way of supporting the apartheid movement that we was trying to get rid of over in South Africa. And when he came over, he spent 2 hours with my mum and dad, and they explained to him what happened and the problems that we was having. And he came out and spoke to the pressers afterwards, and he said that he knew and understood in South Africa that black lives never amount to much and never meant much. But he didn't think the same would be of Great Britain. And just those few words that he said made a huge fundamental difference to my family, Stephen's case, and the momentum that he then took. And I say to him all the time, here's someone that lost 27 years of his life, and he wasn't bitter. He wasn't angry. He didn't walk around, you know, wagging his finger saying, "Oh, all you people, you know, you made my life horrible. I missed out so much of my life." He didn't. And for me, if we all could just take a small page out of Nelson's book and really try to mirror some of the things and the way that he lived his life, then I surely believe that we'll be on the pathway to doing great things. Like I believe that the program that you'll be implementing through Nest will make a huge difference to so many young people. And I can't wait to see the outcomes from that good work that you then do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stuart. That was wonderful. Thank you. We've got some time for questions, and there's none in the chat at the moment, so feel free to write them in the chat or put your hands up. But I've got a quick question to kick off, actually, Stuart, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, sure.
What you've talked about really embodies what we're trying to achieve with Nest, and I think how you've described it at an individual level is what we need to be doing at a service level, and that is that continuous open listening to each other, but also as an organisation and a whole system, and constantly learning and taking that feedback. I absolutely love the ice cream analogy as well, and I think lots of people can really relate to that, you know, it's very bespoke, isn't it? And it needs to reflect what you want. I guess the question I've got, you were very, very clear as a young person what didn't work and what didn't help, and how hard it was to share that. Really, you kind of played along with what the grown-ups wanted. And I guess I'm really curious about, you know, given what you went through as a family, what did help most?
Time. I think for me, I think that was because I was quite a shy young individual. Talking for me was so hard, and to be able to find the right ways of expressing how I felt at that time was hard, because I had no reference point to hang it on, and because Stephen was such the role model in my life, I relied on him so much that I then just was lost for a long while of not knowing who or where to turn for advice. I still do it now. Like, so for instance, I remember like trying to shave for the very first time, and you think to yourself, well, how am I going to do this? what am I going to use? Am I going to go electric? Am I going to go wet? So it was just like, well, who do I then ask? Because my first port of call would be to ask Stephen. So it was that for me, and then also what was important was to try and make sure that I became the big brother that Stephen was for me, for my sister. So that's also what then took a lot of my mind and my concentration away through thinking about myself and my own problems and my own needs, to then going, well, how can I best be the best big brother for my little sister, and to ensure that she never had no problems or no issues. And because my mum and dad split up as well when I was 17, 18. And I remember saying to my parents at the time, look, I've had you both for 17 years of my life, and I really want you to focus on Georgina now for that rest of that time, because I want her to have the same that I had. I don't want it to be anything different. So I'm always quite a selfless person, and I think that's just continued through the way I am now. And that's why I say that it's important for me to check on myself and to ask myself that question. And if I am then struggling, then I can go outwardly ask other people to help. So my wife's a great support system for me. Now, having my son as well is a great support system for me now as well. The other people always, for me, build me up and to put me on that pedestal or that place I need to be.
That's brilliant. Suzanne has asked, actually, did you have a role model growing up when obviously Stephen was no longer there for you?
See, I don't think I had one for a long time, but I now know that that's important. But on reflection, looking back now, my youth, I lived with my youth club leader for a year after Stephen passed away, just because my house was so busy and so much people coming in and coming out. I just wanted normality and a sense of, I want to know when I come home who's going to be there and who's not going to be there. So I lived with my youth club leader for a year, and that stability, and he became a massive role model in my life. He became a massive crutch for me, who, he took me to my college. I finished a college school at 16. I didn't do too well in my GCSEs. I went to my local community college, and then I really wanted to go to a specialist college to learn graphics. And I brought my portfolio together. I went up there. He took me with me. I did my interview, and I didn't get in. I got turned down. And he said to me, Stuart, wait outside. Let me have a chat with this gentleman. So I packed my stuff out, went outside, and he spoke to me for about 5 to 10 minutes. And when I came back in, he said, look, the course lecturer said, look, if you ever miss a lecture, if you ever miss a piece of homework, I'll chuck you off the course. But I will give you this one chance. And that one chance then enabled me to move on to go to university, to
Brilliant.
finish university. So I do believe sometimes those role models are not always evident and identifiable straight away. It's only when you look back on reflection, you go, oh, that was huge. Yeah. But I think if I didn't get through that point, then I would have turned around and been so negative on myself and maybe then gone a different path. I really don't know.
So just him pushing that little bit extra on your behalf made such a difference.
100%.
Sally, you've asked the question, I think, to us all, actually, but how can we all help all of our children from all backgrounds feel that our public services are here for them and that we've got their backs at a national and at a local level? What can we do more of that, exactly what you're describing your youth worker did for you?
Just listen. And it's, do you know what's really important for us adults to recognise and understand? The way we always do things isn't good. Sometimes doing something slightly a bit different, or rather than saying yes or say no. What happens then if I say no? What happens if I say yes rather than saying no? What happens if I, take it on face value what this young person's saying to me, rather than going, oh no, I don't think that? Because again, it's so hard, because what we then do is we go, oh, but this feels familiar to another scenario. So therefore, you start to precede the steps that could go ahead of it. And that's only natural because we are professionals. We're all professionals. We all want to be the best in work in the area. So therefore, sometimes that overtakes us listening and really hearing what that young person wants or needs.
Yeah.
So it's just about sometimes just going, whoa, stop for a second. Am I taking over here too much? Is this too much of me? Am I really giving this young person what they're saying or what they want? And that's really hard to do, to take that step back and to have a bit of perspective from sometimes. That's what I suggest that people do.
Yeah, brilliant. That's slowing it down and really taking the time is so important. And that trusted adults, that's coming across really strongly in the chat as well. And Naomi's given a bit of a shout out. She's from Swindon and is really delighted to see her roundabout honoured.
So Naomi, it wasn't until, I'd have to quickly share, so it wasn't until I watched Glenn Hoddle's documentary about because he had a heart attack recently, and I watched the documentary. So Glenn Hoddle was a Swindon manager. So it wasn't until that program was on and he drove through Swindon, it's like, oh yeah, this is Magic Roundabout again. I was like, do you know how long I've been looking for this? It's been like 6 or 7 years. I found this roundabout as an analogy and I couldn't find out where it's from. So no, big up Swindon. I want to actually go there myself and drive around it just because it seems really mad. I just want to say I've done it myself.
We do have a magic roundabout here in Cardiff. It's not magic for quite the same reasons, but I'll definitely get a photo of that over to you as well, because we're very proud of it here. We've got a question here from Emma Kate. She's saying your parents did such an amazing job in seeking justice for Stephen. Did you ever feel overlooked? And if so, how did that impact on your well-being?
But again, see, I'm because I'm the middle child, and anyone else that's a middle child will know this. You don't. Oh, your one's Liz. You don't really mind because you're used to being overlooked, and I always felt that. Like I say to people all the time, like I was literally going to have my life was just going to be just really basic. You know, I thought to myself, like the most exciting thing that would probably happen in my life is I probably might go into holiday maybe once a year. That's what I thought my life would consist of. So therefore, I don't need the detention. So my younger sister, spoiled rotten, absolute spoiled rotten. You know, Stephen, oh, God's gift, couldn't do no wrong. So it was just the expectation of life for me was very small. So therefore, I don't see it as a negative thing of being overlooked. I just see it as part of my life, really. And my parents, especially my mum, was on such a drive for getting justice for Stephen. And it's not only now that I've had my own child myself that I realise that would consume you. That would consume you. It really would do. And I don't hold that against my parents at all, because again, the system was stacked against us so badly that if they did their job, I say to all the time, I went to school the next day after Stephen passed away. I got the 6 names. I came home going to my mum and dad. That evening, someone put through our letterbox the same 6 names. We found out in 2011 that someone phoned up the police station, gave the same 6 names. Someone walked into the police station, gave the same 6 names. So this should have been an open shut case. We should never be here now, me, who I am. It should never have been. But it was so stacked against us that we just had to continue to fight. And my mum made the statement of Stephen's name, or Stephen will never just be forgotten about. His name and legacy will last forever. That's my mum's mission. And you know, by hell, by high water, by all the stuff that she's and my dad's done, they've just pushed and pushed and pushed till now. We've got to that state where it isn't just, and that's also quite upsetting, because there are so many other young people that lose their lives that are just statistics and numbers. And again, and that's why I do the work that I do, and I go around to encourage young people to understand how precious life is, because again, we are here today. Who knows what happens tomorrow? Absolutely. Who knows if we get another one?
Absolutely. Sharon has commented about the loss of youth work, really, and how vital it is that youth work is supported. And I think certainly in all the conversations we've had about supporting the NEST framework, those trusted adults, those role models with time to take the time to listen in the way that you're describing are absolutely critical. So I completely support that, Sharon. It's
yeah,
such
100%. It's so huge, because again, it's those environments where you're not in the formal settings, that conversations that happen, that those relationships are formed, and then you can then know when someone's not quite at themselves. You know, teachers are put under so much burden of being that person now, that youth worker, that parent, the one that educates. There's so many hats that teacher has to wear, that we do need other trusted adults, like you say, to help pick up the slack a bit more. And for me, youth work in youth groups and youth forums are so important, because again, young people don't see them as establishments or areas where people are watching them or informing on them. It just doesn't feel quite the same as school does, or even like a football club does. Youth groups don't. I don't know why, but there's a sort of environment, there's sort of vibe that goes on there that's quite bespoke and unique there. But we do need to get back there. We've had the last 12 years of austerity where that's just been butchered, and now we've seen the results of all that, where kids don't have nothing to do, and they're consumed by their mobile phones so much. Their social interaction with others is something that's going to start dripping off soon as well, which we need to get back, because we are going to need to be a service provider much more in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Sam from Plamai is saying, you know, she completely agrees and can hear that the trusted adults is absolutely crucial. And that message has just come across so strongly, Stuart. Thank you so much. I think it's time now to hand over to Professor Sally Holland, who's the Children's Commissioner for Wales. So thank you, Stuart. Let me just take this opportunity, and everybody's clapping in the windows. And I'm going to pass over to Sally.
Thank you.
Diolch yn fawr, Liz, a diolch, Stuart. It's really hard to follow. I usually come on after a child or young person has made a really compelling contribution, and which is equally hard to follow. I'm going to try not to make mine too dry in comparison, but I found that very inspiring and interesting. And just as I just kept thinking about middle children then, when I had my third child, my second one was already 6, so he overheard my mother-in-law saying that he would develop all sorts of problems as a middle child, and he's dined out on it ever since. And his favourite phrase is, as the most confident, dominant, outgoing of my 3 children, is, "But Mum, I've got middle child syndrome," to get out of everything. So he does milk that one, I have to say. I'm going to talk about, from a slightly more policy point of view, really, about how we can get a proper lens on thinking about equality and diversity, using a human rights approach when thinking about our public services for children. And I will give examples mainly today from our wider mental health and well-being services, although you know, these are all of our services are interconnected. We've had a very important example today about the importance of youth work, which I wholeheartedly agree with. And I think something that's important about youth work is, you know, it's completely open, it's non-stigmatizing, you're not going there because you have problems, for example, but also you don't have to be good at anything. That, you know, it's wonderful that we have so many sports and culture and arts groups and things, but you kind of have to, you know, at least have an attempt at doing a specialist thing with those. So someone else mentioned uniform groups, and they're another one where it's great. You can go along and just it's just very generic, which is super. I'm just going to share my slides and put on a slideshow. So I think, you know, I'm going to talk about children's rights approach today. And I think, you know, I had a quick look at the participants, and some, but not all of you, will have heard me talk about this before. But today I'm going to focus specifically on how the 5 principles of a children's rights approach can help us really think about achieving some equity of possibilities and service to all of our children, particularly those who often miss out. And then I'm going to go on to actually provide a bit of data very briefly on inequalities and mental health in Wales, in Wales in particular, and then some analysis on how well Wales is doing on all of these things. I just want to, you know, remind you that as an office, we ask all of our public services, when they're delivering their services, to take a children's rights approach, which is a framework through which you can ensure that you're delivering all of children's 42 rights under the UN Convention of the Rights of the Child, and their rights under other important UN conventions too, and particularly relevant today is the UN Convention on the Rights of Disabled People. and that you're really doing that systematically and thinking it through, and it's not a sort of tokenistic, oh yes, of course we support children's rights. And we've worked really hard as an office with lots of different national and local organisations, but particularly all of our health boards, all of our police forces, our government, and many others. Transport for Wales, I'm launching something with next week or in a couple of weeks, for example. And just a reminder that when we're talking about children's human rights, we're talking about all of us, everyone in this room, whether you've got a professional or a personal interest in supporting children. Children rely on us as adults to access their rights, and therefore under the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, we are all duty bearers for children's rights, and we all have a responsibility to uphold children's human rights. And so you can add that to your very long CVs. You and we and I are all human rights workers. And I'm pleased that in Wales we're happy to use human rights language in our political life right across parties, but also in our public life as well. And I'll explain now why that's so important. I'm going to talk to you about these 5 principles now. And the first principle of the Children's Rights Framework is embedding the UNCRC. And one of the most important aspects of embedding the UNCRC is that as we provide public services to our children, whether that's at a big national or local corporate level, or in our everyday interactions with children as practitioners and as parents, that we use rights language with children. It's really important that particularly our children who often face more barriers than others because of the inequalities in our society, that they hear rights language. It's important that children who are refugees, for example, or who have friends who are refugees, that they know that there is a specific children's human right to have the same care and support as a child who was born in the nation. It's really important that our children who are disabled know about Article 23 of the UNCRC and the United Nations Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities, that they have a right to services. We don't provide perhaps adapted services or integrated services or special services because we feel sorry for disabled children, or because we feel we really ought to. We provide them because they have the same right as every other child to those services. Article 2 of the UNCRC, all children have these rights no matter what, and that is such an important message. Similarly, children should know that they have extra rights, as well as all the same rights as every other child, extra rights for special care if they cannot live at home with their family, if they're adopted or looked after, for example, and that they have special rights to be, under Article 39, to be supported to recover from any trauma that they have experienced. And this language is so important because children can absorb and carry sort of internal scripts about how deserving they are in society compared to other children that they see who might seem to them to breeze through lives or to be particularly privileged. And it's very, very important that children have those really strong messages that they have these equal access to their rights, and that if they don't have equal access to them, we're there as adults to remove those barriers. As I say to children when I speak to them, as we walk along the path of life or over on the playing fields of life, it's not even for everyone. Some of us, some groups, face bumps along the road or potholes that will fall down as well. But actually, the adults around you are here to pull you out of those potholes or to flatten down those bumps so that everyone can get to the end point, which is fulfilling your potential and your goals and dreams as an individual. So as services, we need to make sure that we're using rights languages. Here's just one example. I think it's the, I haven't labelled it actually, but I think it's the Welsh Ambulance Service example who've worked with children to say what, you know, some of the top rights that they try to do when they're providing services for children, and many other services do that. Equality and non-discrimination is the second main principle of our children's rights approach. And of course, it's an absolutely core human rights principle. After the horrors of the Second World War, we're seeing horrors in Europe again as we speak. You know, the world came together to say never again will people be discriminated against because of their religion, their race, their political beliefs, their sexuality, their disability, etc. And that's why we made human rights declarations now, and that's why we developed an extra layer of rights for children who often have even less access to their rights than adults. That's why children are often our key you know, concern for us in times of war, because they're more likely to be deprived of their rights. Now, it's really important to think about this in our services in two ways. One is our institutional practices. What institutional practices do we have that might lead some children to find it harder to access our services or to make best use of them? I've got great admiration today, and I don't want to make her blush, but luckily I can't see anybody while I'm presenting, but Liz, our chair today, you know, has come, you know, worked hard for years and has actually not just talked about it, but has transformed services in her region using what she called the iceberg model. So it tried to turn things on their head, because she said that, you know, it's the least resourced children who probably needed our mental health services most, who were not getting to see the golden ticket of clinical appointments, and that we needed instead to turn around how we provided services to make sure that they reach those who need it most. And secondly, you know, it's about the individual as well. And when we are supporting children and young people, recognizing that extra psychological impact that some children will carry after experiences of, for example, racism or any other form of abuse or difficult everyday experiences related to who they are as a person, whether that's disableism, homophobia, transphobia, misogyny, etc. I recently, you know, had a real privilege to meet a group of children from Roma backgrounds. They were primary school children who'd asked to meet me and talk to me about their everyday experiences with the support of their school, which is a very supportive place for them. It was really striking to me the burden and worries that those children carry on behalf actually of their whole families, because they're often interpreters and translators for their families as well, that they were carrying burden of anxiety about abuse that they and their families are subject to on a daily basis, and layers of poverty and historical discrimination as well. You know, the good news is that their school, youth services, police and others and my own office are working with them to help them feel empowered and feel and to understand that them sharing their experiences, it is making a difference to how people are responding, and that they can be agents of change. But it's just a reminder really of that sort of extra layers of psychological impact that some of our children are many of our children are experiencing. The third principle is empowering children. And, you know, this basically means that children need to learn about their rights. So they need to know they've got rights, and they need good experiences of taking up their rights in order to receive their rights. And there's so many ways, of course, that you as representatives of services in particular will be trying to or working on this already. So, you know, it might be about working with children specifically in support groups to make sure that they're building skills and knowledge in order to to know that they're not alone for a start, but also to build skills and knowledge in order to take up their rights. There's so many good examples in Wales that, you know, the groups run by East, for example. I know we're going to hear about some diverse Cymru groups today. Just a couple of other examples in Betsi Cadwaladr region. They're working really hard on listening to children, young people's stories of being users of health services, providing them with training and support to share those narratives, and so powerful they are, and they're helping to make waves and changes right across North Wales region. The Hope group in Neath Talbot of girls who are looked after in foster care and residential care, who have fun and companionship coming together, building up their self-esteem, and are also speaking out and making changes as they build up their skills and confidence. I'm pleased to say that in Wales, under the new curriculum, all children will learn about their human rights, and that was a bit of a victory we got through as the Act went through last year. It's so important. We can't underestimate how important it is that children actually understand and know that they have human rights. The fourth principle is participation. I was really struck by Stuart's words on the difference between hearing and listening. And it is so important that we don't tokenistically ask children their views, but that we take their views meaningfully into account, but also that we're listening to a really good range of children's views, and really analysing who is participating in our participation structures in our service, and how can we find the right ways to enable all children to participate, especially those who we often don't hear from enough. And the last principle is accountability. And it is so important that those of us providing services or running services are accountable to children. What have we done with the views that they've shared with us? What are our aims? What are we trying to do as a service? And have we communicated that well to the children we're here to serve? What are our statistics? How well are we doing that? How well are we engaging and serving different groups in our society, for example? So inequalities in Wales and how we're doing on them. Keeping an eye on time, Chair. We whiz through the next bit. Well, a lot of people here will be familiar with the large surveys that we did as an office in partnership with the other partners on this slide. And of course, so what the pandemic's done for us is to highlight the inequalities that were already there in society, but also how at times of crisis it's so important that we keep a close eye on children and adults' access to their human rights, because those who are going to have more difficulty in accessing them are going to have even more difficulty in a crisis like a pandemic, or, as I've said earlier, a war. So what we found in our surveys, we did analysis by different groups, was that groups that were missing out before actually were having a harder time in the pandemic than their peers. So just to give you a couple of quick examples, disabled children and young people, these are children and young people who said in the survey that they were disabled. Talked about also access to all sorts of services, but in terms of well-being, said that they were more likely to be worrying about the situation, feeling lonely, for example, and unsafe, and that they needed extra help they didn't have all the services they normally relied on. Children from Black, Asian and ethnic minority groups, and of course, there's a huge variety there, and this wasn't the case right across all individual ethnic minority groups, but when we analysed children from those groups as a whole, were significantly more likely to feel lonely and less likely to feel safe at the time of the surveys. And when we drilled down into that in the second survey, a lot of that lack of safety was about things like food security and concerns about education, and also concerns about the virus itself and the impact on the disproportionate impact on people from ethnic minority communities. And then just to give you a couple more examples of, the many groups that we know we need to pay special attention to when we're thinking about equalities in our services is neurodiversity is an issue that I've highlighted many times as Commissioner, and we'll continue to do more work on over the next year. But just really a reminder that we actually build in institutional inequalities for enabling our children from neurodiverse backgrounds to access some of our services like our mental health services, despite the strong co-occurrence of mental health difficulties and some neurodevelopmental conditions. We actually build in all sorts of complicated steps in order to be seen by our mental health services. And then I just wanted to mention poverty as a key driver, a key inequality in our society, of course, underlines many of those other inequalities that I've just been discussing. But just to remember, you know, that poverty in itself drives mental health problems, and especially poverty that persists over time. Also, you know, we've got research from the Millennium Cohort study that shows us that children entering poverty during childhood is a heightened risk for childhood mental health problems, and that's a particular concern in the pandemic period and coming out of it, in that many families will have moved into poverty for the first time, and the energy crisis, of course, will add to that. So, of course, as an office, as many of you here today will know, we've been asking our services to ensure that they are stopping our children and their families having to keep knocking on lots of doors and for help, and keep being told that they've knocked on the wrong door, the door's been slammed in their faces. Instead, we want to wrap around, as the nest, as is encompassed in the nest model. We want to wrap around our children and families and make sure they get the right support at the right time without having to knock on lots of doors. We visited all of our regions a couple of years ago to see how they were doing, published a report on it, and we've been back in the last year. And last week we published an updated report on that. And when I finish speaking, I will pop it the link into the chat in case anyone missed our follow-up report. I mean, what we found was encouraging in many ways, in that every region has now moved on to have a plan or working towards having services that are much more joined up and no wrong door. And this is from 2 years before, when we often heard, you know, we don't really do much on children at a regional board level. All have got groups now dedicated to children's issues, and there are some really exciting plans of involving children to co-produce. Some are already working on that well and producing more wraparound services that we had asked for. There are still many barriers, unfortunately, as well. You know, still people fighting over children and families' heads on agreeing care packages, long waits, which have got worse and longer, I'm afraid, post-pandemic in some areas, but not in every one. And as I've already said, some real institutional barriers for neurodivergent children. So what challenges do we still have moving ahead in Wales? Well, we do need to recognise and tackle discrimination and structural inequalities. They are there. We know they're there. We increased our awareness of this during the pandemic. All of us, including my organisation, have work to do on that. And I think we've all had a bit of a wake-up call in the last few years on how much we still have to do on tackling racism and also other inequalities. And, you know, we can... you know, there's been talk already today about having a sort of more individual, less institutional response. And I think the NEST framework will allow us to do that, but it needs to be needs-led and not saying, you know, sorry, you've got the wrong kind of problems and you don't fit into any of our boxes. I do think there's a real wish to do that in Wales. Everyone I speak to in Wales really wants to do that, but I think they just really need to make sure that we can actually operationalise that, and we can only do that by continuing to listen to our children and their families from all backgrounds to make sure that that we're getting it right each time, and by co-producing services with them. So diolch yn fawr am wrando, diolch i chi gyd am eich gwaith, ac dwi'n hapus i gael cwestiynau now. I'm very happy to take some questions. Thank you very much for listening.
Muting myself. Diolch, Sally. Thank you so much. That was a fantastic presentation, and you do so well at bringing the rights, children's rights to life, and helping us think about how we can operationalize them day to day. I think that's a fantastic skill that you have. I'm really aware that you are 7 years into your tenure. I think you've got just a month left. And I guess I want to kick off with a question about, you know, what would you reflect on in terms of what's been achieved and what you're proud of in the last 7 years?
Well, we were rehearsing this earlier because I'm doing a TV interview about this tomorrow in my office. I do think we've moved on in Wales in the last 7 years. You're right, I've got just 4 weeks left in role, and really proud that Rosia Cifuentes, front leader of East, will be taking over from me, who will have lots more to say on all of these issues today and many others when she takes up post. You know, it's you know, just one gain for me is that next Monday the legislation which removes the defence for parents of corporal punishment is coming into force. You know, on the day I was appointed, I campaigned for this for years before I came into post, and the day I was appointed, I said that was one of my it was just a key children's rights breach as far as I was concerned. So that's quite nice that it is coming in. It's amazing how long things take, isn't it? That's been one of the key lessons for me as commissioner, that, you know, there's an awful long way between actually government accepting they'll do something differently, or they'll pass legislation or bring out some new guidance, to it actually happening and making a difference to children's lives day to day. That just as there's a difference between all of our intentions to implement a children's rights approach and a no wrong door approach when children want our services, to actually children and families experiencing that. You know, we see little pockets, we move forward, but I still get a lot of cases into my office. But I think the fact that we have so moved on in our understanding of how to support children's mental health and well-being in the last 7 years. And, you know, a lot of people on this call today have contributed to that. You know, I think that, you know, it's still quite a crude understanding that if we just pump money into clinical services and make more and more appointments available, that we will fix it. But it's a bit like building another motorway, isn't it? And thinking we'll fix traffic problems more and more. You know, I'm not everyone here is old enough to remember the M25 opening, but I really remember the M25 opening, and it just filled up straight away. You know, and the same would happen is if we do need more clinical appointments. By the way, we do need more mental health clinicians. But if that's all we did, then we would just get more and more demand. And I do think we've changed how we think we're going to support children's mental health and well-being in Wales. And that's been a phenomenal step forward. So I think they're the two things I'm going to pick out.
Absolutely. And Adele's saying we've got to look at the root causes, which
Absolutely.
is exactly what we're trying to do. And I think you're right. I think Wales has taken quite big leaps forward in that respect, and that's the understanding of what we need to do, even though there's still a long way to go. I'm aware of the time. We've got a couple more minutes. Does anybody else have any questions for Sally while we've still got her? No? Okay, well, I'll give people a little bit of time, and maybe Emma. Oh, hang on, Adele's got a question. There we go.
Hi, Sally. I suppose really, and you've heard this from me before, is I see the answer to it in inclusive education. And I think that, I mean, I've seen it with my own children where they have not been valued as individuals in education. And it creates this, that they're never good enough and they don't have the options, you know. So I every opportunity I can get is, when are we going to have inclusive education in our schools, please, or even start talking about it more, because even the ALN Act won't achieve that. It's very confusing. Sorry, big question.
It's a huge question, but it is such an important one, and you know, I think that's what I was trying to get to in the language that we use as well. I mean, it's more than language. You want structural changes, I know, Adele, but you know, if we're continually giving children messages that they are different, and potentially giving the message that they're therefore inferior. I don't mean people are saying that, but that's what children can absorb, and parents can absorb too, you know, less deserving, these kind of things, then it has a huge impact on our children, but also on all of us as a society, if we don't recognise everyone's strengths and abilities and only see their disabilities. Obviously, on inclusive education, you know, there are those who are big fans of special schools in particular, and say it's been life-changing for the child to move into a special school, for example, but there's much more we must do to make our mainstream schools more inclusive, in so many ways actually, but around disabled children and neurodiverse children in particular, as well. Rather, there's an awful lot more for us to do. You know, I think we're making some small steps for the whole school approach to mental health and well-being. It's got some really good potential, I think, for us to really understand how we're nurturing and supporting every child. But you know, we're not going to fix this overnight, Adele, I think.
Thank you, Sally.
But you know, you've got to keep asking those questions, and it's those warrior mums and warrior dads, as well as the strong voices of the young people, that actually make change.
Warrior mum, it makes me think about Stuart, and I know we'll be in trouble because you're still here, Stuart, even though I was told you had to leave at 2. So I'm delighted, but don't get me in trouble.
Oh, no, I'm going. I was so engaged.
But pass our regards to your warrior mum.
I will do. Bye everyone. Bye.
Cheerio. I think we've got 1 more minute left and 1 more question maybe from Sharon.
Oh, hi, yeah. I'm just really enjoying today. It's just so informative. As a mum, I'm probably a warrior mum, but not quite on the right path at the moment of how to become a warrior mum. Having first-hand experience of my daughter within suffering from mental health since the pandemic and since the schools closed, and having anxiety with regards returning to school. I think the schools, especially my daughter's school, are focusing on your attainment and your education, and whilst that's important, that increases the pressure on a young person's mental health. And I think it needs to be not just school and parenting in silos. This needs to be a more joined up approach where a parent, you know, if a child is having difficulties, it's not send an email to say, you know, your child's piece of work needs to be handed in. It's having that discussion with the parent and saying, look, you know, your child is obviously falling behind because of the work, and how can we jointly help that? But it's having these messages to my daughter, you haven't done this piece of work, or this deadline is looming. And I think it's down to parents as well. And I'm just wondering, how do you feel schools should be informing and can work with parents better? Because I think unless you have the information, you can't be a warrior mum or warrior dad or whatever. So I think sometimes it's whether it's lack of knowledge by the school or that lack of experience around, you know, working with children with mental health. So I'm just wondering how you can, you know, improve that communication and what emphasis there will be on schools to do this.
Sharon, I think you've slightly answered your own question in a way, in that how vital the parents or carers role is here, and that, you know, it's the same with mental health services actually as well. I was speaking to some bereaved parents actually last week about this, about how important it is to involve parents who are the experts in their own children, and you know, we must work closely with them. Kerry Reid is on this call from Parents Voice in Wales. You may well know and work with already, but I know Kerry may well want to put a comment in the chat about this. I know you've got strong views, but I suppose one comment would be that. Two comments. One is that I know the government is working on concepts of really pushing the idea of community schools, which really strongly must involve all sectors of of our local communities, including parents. You know, schools won't get things right unless they engage with parents well, and some schools just do it really well. And they can. There's a kind of award scheme whose name I'll try and remember and pop in the chat for schools, you know, but on how well they work with parents. Someone else might know and pop in the chat ahead of me. But definitely some schools do this really well, and it pays such dividends for the school as well as for the child when they do that. And the second point is on attendance and children's involvement at the moment. I just feel really strongly that it's important that we don't just think about moving back towards any kind of punitive approach here, but that we enable our schools to draw in the other services that are there to help them, because it is, you know, schools can't do everything on their own, to support families to find out the reasons why a child is finding it hard to engage and to put that support in. And unfortunately, you know, there's been some calls recently to return to fining and court orders and that kind of thing. And I think unless someone is just willfully cannot be bothered to send their child to school, and it's so rarely that, it's nearly always something much more complicated, then it's just not the way forward as far as I'm concerned. And I do think that is the current government stance, and I do agree with them on that. But not everyone around Wales does agree with me on that, I'm aware.
Oh, thank you, Sally. I'm aware that we've got another question from Karis, but Karis, going to press pause on that because we really need to crack on and pass on to our next speaker. And I'm absolutely thrilled to introduce Alfred Akayo, who's the director of BMHS, who's going to be talking about why getting policy right in this area is so critical.
Oh, thank you, Liz. Can you see my screen?
Yes, brilliant.
Oh, fantastic. I'll just be sharing today to complement what the Children Commissioner said and Stuart regarding why policy and strategy is just so important as part of the work we are all doing collaboratively, to support children and young people, particularly in Wales. And just a brief introduction to what BMHS represents and what we've been doing regarding children and young people's mental health. Primarily, what we do is to advocate for health equality, working hand in hand with the government to provide thoughts and ideas on what could be done differently. And then also we provide education to break down barriers around mental health. And then we also provide direct support to our service users through different projects. I know Sally should have mentioned the summer of fun activities and winter of fun activities. I think that made massive difference in the lives of children and young people in Wales, and hopefully in future that is something the Commission will continue to do. So that's just a brief introduction about what BMHS does. But today, just to establish some facts around why children and young people's mental health is just so important to speak about. Some key statistics that we can be mindful of is the fact that 1 in 6 school-age children has a mental health problem. And again, this has actually risen from 1 in 10 in 2004 to 1 in 9 in 2017. And this statistics has not actually captured, what is going on right now in Ukraine, for example, and particularly what we all went through, during the pandemic. So the reality is that there is a lot of, work that needs to be done, particularly when it comes to children and young people. And also, if you look at children from racialized communities, they are less likely than their white peers, for example, to access traditional mental health services as well. And we've also seen an increase in statistics around the support being received through court orders, through the criminal justice system, rather than through the primary healthcare system. And all this just further emphasize the fact that there's a lot of work we can still do in Wales when it comes to children and young people's mental health. And also, if you look at some of the thoughts that the Children Commissioner mentioned earlier regarding poverty and socio-economic factors, you could tell that there is a direct correlation as well when it comes to, children from poorest, 20% of households are 4 times as likely as well to actually have mental health difficulties at the age of 11. And that's something that we've seen over time as well. So that's just some statistics for you to give you an idea. And I noted also the presentation of the commissioner about disability. We've also seen an increased, spike in children with disability having 3 times more likely than to actually have mental health problems as well. And the reason why I've shared all the statistics is to actually talk about what we can do differently to lower the statistics. And that is where policy and strategy becomes so important. And more importantly, we need to talk about it because we've seen that we rarely speak about it, particularly when it comes to ethnic minority communities. Mental health stigma still exists, and it's not something we actually speak often about. So it's just so important. And so regarding the drivers or the major influences of these crises, there are some biggest drivers of it. For example, we know racism and discrimination is a big factor. We know mental health stigma in the community is one of the big drivers as well, where children are finding it difficult to even express some of the things they are going through to their parents because of the stigma. I mentioned earlier about the criminal justice system, how we know that is a big pull rather than through the primary healthcare system. And then, of course, the social and economic factors and inequalities that ranges from unemployment, to household, to accommodation issues and all that. And then the other factors, including LGBT, gender, sexuality, and these are key drivers of these statistics that we all need to be mindful of. But the good news is, if we look at what we can do differently around policy and strategy, it has to do with the regulatory framework itself. And that's why this slide is just talking about the fact that this is not a challenge that the government, NHS, or local government can meet on its own. We will need broader and deeper partnerships, just like what we're doing today. We will need new skills, new ways of working. We will need literally everyone to actually take more responsibility for their own health and well-being as well. So we're talking about a new, whole system approach that will be equitable, that will improve the health outcome for everyone. And again, why policy and strategy is so important is if you look back at the excellence that we've achieved each time we look at the regulatory framework that underpins mental health, not just in Wales, even in the United Kingdom, you could see I pointed out 2 historical excellence that we can actually make reference to. A lot of people don't know that Mental Health Act before used to be called Lunacy Act, for instance. And I always like to say that this is one of the root causes of the stigma around mental health, not just in the UK, literally across the whole world, because most of the laws of the United Kingdom were actually inherited after colonization by a lot of other countries as well. And what changed significantly was when this act was renamed to be Mental Health Act, and a lot of languages, the commissioner said a lot about languages, choice of word, were replaced. And after that, we could see that mental health normalization conversation became easier, for example, in United Kingdom. And recently in 1961, as you could tell, with the Suicide Act that decriminalized the act of suicide, you could tell already that anytime we do something about the regulatory framework, there is an excellence that follows through afterwards. And that's why this session is about emphasizing and providing information to everyone here who have access to actually drive home this point about what needs to be done differently. Because what we've done cleverly is that we've actually have like a repeat of the same thing over the years. And what we have not done is to actually look at the regulatory framework that underpins mental health, particularly children and young people's mental health. For example, the Mental Health Act itself is since 1983, is almost 40 years old. It's not a reflection of what the society looks like right now. If you look at children, LGBT, BAME, if you look at the fact that homeschooling is a big factor now, all these differences that exemplify this generation and the society that we live now are not adequately captured, or they are not reflected in the regulatory framework. And that's why it's so important. And also because the act itself, the code of practice itself, is the anchor, is the primary legislation. What we've done so well is to have a lot of multiple policies, multiple secondary legislation that are sometimes not even in sync or in alignment with the primary legislation. And that's why it's so important to, to look at the policy and the strategy and the regulatory framework. And then thirdly, also is the structural discrimination that is inherent in the laws itself. I noted from the comment by the commissioner as well, she mentioned something around institutional practices, and these are the key things that we're referring to when we talk about structural discrimination. They refer to institutional practices or policies within institutions that are intended to be neutral. Well, what it does is that it results in adverse outcomes for some particular groups. And that's why it's so important to look at this framework to ensure that it's a reflection again of the diversity. And then lastly, it's about the accessibility of the law itself, accessibility of the policy itself. Because at the end of the day, ignorance of the law is not an excuse when people fall foul of it. So again, ensuring that this regulatory framework, they are available, they are easily, you can go through them, and then it is also clear for a service user to actually take it up. A very good example is the Senis law, for example, that talks about the use of force. A lot of people don't know that that is now in place. And also, if you look at that law, there are some big components of that law that is not applicable in Wales, which will have made massive difference when it comes to the use of force when we talk about mental health as well, when people get sectioned and all that. Again, just to share with you this slide about what we think that needs to be done differently around policy and strategy, where we need to build competencies around these three key areas. I think from where we see it, we believe if we can build competencies around recruitment, it will make massive difference. And when we say recruitment, it's about ensuring that we can encourage diverse pipelines of mental health professionals, to come into the system, because representation matters, particularly for children and young people as well. And then also access. We've spoken about earlier about the criminal justice system, how that has been the pull factor for a lot of ethnic minorities, for example, to access mental health services, to try to ensure that we have that plurality of services where marginalized groups can actually access mental health services as well. And then lastly, it has to do with culturally capable interventions. So many times when we mention culturally capable interventions, some people think we're talking about language or multilingual. It's not just about language. It has a lot to do with culture and also what people consider the best when it comes to the kind of treatment that they want, because a one-size-fits-all approach does not work efficiently when it comes to mental health, particularly medicating the interventions as well, has proven not to be the best outcome for people as well. And that's why I quickly made reference to, for example, the summer of fun, the winter of fun. Those kind of activities make massive difference in the lives of children and young people in Wales. And hopefully that is something that can be built around as a structure moving forward to support children and young people. And lastly, this is just a slide for me just to tell you more about what we do. Like I've said earlier, BMHS provides information education to support children and young people. And I hope that I've been able to shed some light to everyone here about what needs to be done differently, so that by doing something different, we can get a different result. And looking at the regulatory framework is just so important, because that is something that we've not really channeled concerted energy on. And that is something that we all need to collectively, literally provide more support to the government to ensure that it is looked at, so that we are not leaving our children and young people behind. I'll welcome any question from anyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alfred. Fantastic presentation and lots of compliments about your slides, which we will be sharing. And I think just that idea of looking back in order to look forward and looking at the history of how things have developed in the way that they have is so relevant, but also why it's so important to start with that rights-based approach rather than historically how have we done things. That we, if we look at what children need in order to thrive, that's absolutely critical. We've got some time for questions at the end, but I'm going to ask now to pass over to Zara, who's going to be presenting from Hype Cymru.
Hello, right, can you see my slides?
Perfect.
Brilliant. Okay, so hi, my name's Zara Bashir. I'm the Black Asian Minority Ethnic Youth Worker here at Divers Cymru. So Divers Cymru is a unique Welsh charity committed to supporting people faced with inequality and discrimination, and I lead the project Hype Cymru. Hype Cymru is a Welsh government-funded project, and Hype basically stands for helping young people through empowerment. And I think we've all heard that word empowerment the last hour or so. Empowerment being for us is education on mental health, helping break barriers for the young people accessing services and break stigma in ethnic communities. So Alfred's actually just gone through quite a few statistics with young people. I'm just sharing a few with 25 plus. So you've got Black, Asian, minority ethnic people are 40% more likely to be turned away from mental health services. Black people in mental health institutions are 29% more likely to be forcibly restrained and 49% more likely to be placed in seclusion. The admission rate for Black, Asian, minority ethnic people are 6 times higher than the average. Black patients are 49% more likely to be admitted to intensive care and secure services, and Black patients are 52% more likely to be given higher doses of antipsychotic medication. Black African women who are asylum seekers are estimated to have a mortality rate 7 times higher than for white women. These statistics are mainly for adults. However, this identifies the need to work with mental health services, but to also highlight mental health issues for young people for prevention and early diagnosis. So why are Black, Asian, minority ethnic adults going in with severe mental health issues? Why are they being missed as young people? If we just look at inequalities in public services, recent research by the YMCA, excuse me, among young people of Black and mixed ethnicity, found many felt they had to change to be accepted in society. Asked about racism in education, 95% said they had witnessed racist language at school, and 49% said they believed racism was the biggest barrier to academic attainment. If young people are experiencing racism in education and not finding the help they need there, how likely are they to look at another public service for help? So Divers Cymru in 2014 produced a report entitled "To Improve the Mental Health Outcomes of Young African Caribbean Men, Better Outcomes New Approach," from a study funded by Mind Cymru. The objective was to research mechanisms that could improve mental health outcomes for young African Caribbean men aged 16 to 25. The findings of this report provided an evidential basis to design and deliver a project working directly to improve said outcomes. So Get Your Kicks On project was formed in 2015. Get Your Kicks On was basically just simply means get up, let's get moving, time to move. So we went with the shoe. The Get Your Kicks On project was a 3-year project working in Cardiff, Newport, Swansea and Wrexham. They aimed to develop and implement an all-Wales Black, Asian, minority young males mental health project working with 14 to 25-year-olds. An element of the project involved engaging with young people with mental ill health and collecting their views and concerns in relation to mental health services for young people, as well as their suggestions for how such services could be improved. So we began with questionnaires. We asked young people in the 4 areas, Cardiff, Newport, Swansea and Wrexham. So we asked young people if they had heard or knew any of the following terms. You can see here, understanding was very low. Another question was, what words would you use to describe mental health? So if I've got bonkers, crazy, sick, hysterical, restrained. Interestingly, the words used were all negative and extreme. And a few times, if you can see, the word white pops up. Now, when asked, white, how does that describe mental health? The young people explained white is basically means it's not for us, it's for them. Yeah. So this basically highlights the lack of acknowledgement and involvement in mental health services, as the young people from ethnic communities do not see it for them. So another question was, who would young Black, Asian and minority ethnic males talk to? Here it clearly shows if they had to speak to anyone, the professionals are the ones who they would least likely speak to. Unfortunately, the findings did not confirm that young males are not aware of mental health issues and also where to go to get help. They also reported a significant stigma around mental health in most ethnic communities. Ooh, jumping off my slide, there you go. So here's a quote from one of the parents we spoke to. So parents of participants also spoke about their own gaps in knowledge of being unaware how overrepresentative ethnic males are when looking at the statistics of those with severe mental health issues. Two mothers stated very honestly that because society engenders men with a disproportionate amount of privilege compared to women, they didn't take their own sons' complaints of feeling low and down very seriously. So here she just says, I just presume males don't need help with any mental health issues because society is a lot easier on a male compared to a female. So I didn't actually take my son's complaints of feeling low and down seriously. I just told him to carry on as he does not have much to complain about. So our approach then had to change. Yeah, we were out there. Yes, we were being seen, but I didn't believe we were being heard. So I used music and poetry that young people listened to and read. So looking at recent artists, we used Kendrick Lamar and found his album. The track here is You. Lamar rap some dealings and then about coming through this stage in his life. So if you see, I know your secrets, I'm not going to rap, mood swings are frequent, I know depression is resting, if this bottle could talk, gulp, I cry myself to sleep, everything is your fault, you just can't get right, if those mirrors could talk, it would say you've got to go. Printing off lyrics and reading them and listening to them, the young people spoke about how they can relate, having this dark space sometimes themselves, questioning going out, questioning friendships, if they're struggling socializing or speaking up, feeling like they had failed themselves. The music workshops, I think, was a bit of a like Pandora's box moment. It was open, everyone was talking and everyone wanted to share, which was fantastic. And it was interesting to see that the terminology they had not heard of before, such as anxiety or bipolar, were being described word to word without the terms we use. So here's just one of the poems we used. So using Kendrick Lamar and Tupac, another Black, Asian, minority ethnic celebrities, we started to tackle the stigma around mental health issues in ethnic males. If young people don't understand the terminology used in this field, how often or how do they speak to a doctor when seeking help? This was mentioned quite a lot. We started to break barriers, learning terminology, signposting, where to have help through music and poetry workshops. Another aspect of Get Your Kicks On was our green prescription, which basically involves taking young people to the beautiful green areas we have here in Wales to benefit their mental health. A very holistic approach that's worked tremendously well. Young people receive a bag with leaflets from local organisations, our mental health leaflet, and a pen and a paper if they'd like to express themselves or leave me a comment. They've also got my number, so if they wanted to send me a text, which was most of the time the popular choice for leaving comments. Young people have also requested, or did for Get Your Kicks On, requested particular walks and visits, making Green Prescription a group project with involvement from everyone, from the youth worker to the young people and the young people's families. So then from Get Your Kicks On, Hype Cymru developed. Hype began in 2018 and is currently running now. So from the outcomes of Get Your Kicks On, we listened and changed Hype to working with young females as well as young males, because whilst we were out there working with young males, we had a lot of young females wanting to work with us. I say we, it's me. I keep saying we. I work with parents now, and the parents wanted to have a regular drop-in. So we established a regular drop-in in Cardiff originally. And then I had to find a regular space, our shed. Our shed is in Grangetown, and we have 2 weekly sessions, one in the day and then one in the evening, just in case we miss someone who's work, college, or yeah. So we were available. The age range also needed to change. So in Get Your Kicks On, it's 14 to 25. I wanted to drop that down again, and I dropped it to 7. So 7 to 25. We started to work in primary schools. We introduced yoga and mindfulness to help build tools for resilience, and 3 tools that can be practiced anywhere and are beneficial for our mental health and physical health. And Green Prescription also started to include our library, so books, the theatre and the arts. So Hype Cymru has a steering group. Hype Cymru always consults for the young people who participate in the project for their evaluation and fresh ideas moving forward. This is a tool that empowers young people and also boosts confidence, and is imperative in the success of the project. Excuse me. Hype also trains 4 young people from each area, so Cardiff, Newport, Swansea, Wrexham. So we've got collecting information from youth groups they attend and helping them to be the voice for their area to represent the local young people. We make sure our steering group members all attend our Black, Asian, minority ethnic mental health awareness training sessions, covering barriers ethnic communities face in mental health and awareness of common mental health issues affecting young people. We then hold regular focus groups to gain their insight and views on the issues that affect them. In Hype, we started with kitchen therapy sessions. So the sessions were held during the school holidays. Young people had free meal. We also had a topic of discussion every session. So this one I've got here is we discussed if ethnic families acknowledge mental health. Conversations naturally evolve in the kitchen. The sessions were carried out with young people from the age of 11 to 19 years old. So working with a younger age group in primary schools, working with Muslim Scouts, community centres and family day trips. So here we've got a couple of pictures of our primary sessions. There's a little scout, I think it's one of the youngest. We've got our mindfulness session in primary outside using the leaves to help learn how to calm ourselves down. Our summer session, and the little one in the corner there is a family trip to Dalarogov Caves. So in primary school, we had our feelings workshops. Working with our younger groups from 7 to 11, we discuss feelings, finding out what young people's vocabulary is in regards to expressing themselves, their feelings. Good and okay popped up a lot. If you think about if you're walking with a child and someone walks past you and just says hello and how are you, and oh, good, thanks. So that's what a lot of young primary school children were saying. Yeah, good, okay was the ones that they'd go to the most. Interestingly though, young people came to the conclusion that they shouldn't talk about feelings that were uncomfortable. So sorry, we steered away from good and bad feelings. We only had uncomfortable feelings and comfortable feelings. And we looked at how our feelings came out in our bodies. If it was a comfortable feeling, we might be smiling, our eyes might grow. If it's an uncomfortable feeling, going in our belly, your hands might get sweaty. So when asked, would you speak about an uncomfortable feeling? In the first year, 98% of the children said no, all with the similar explanation of if you speak about it, it will make others feel like it. So they don't, to avoid hurting others around them. We obviously then work to challenge this idea, educating the younger group on the importance of speaking about your feelings. And so in some schools, especially where ethnic children were the minority, children were less confident to speak about their heritage, the fact they could speak, 3 or 4 languages, which is just amazing. They just shied away from saying their name out loud because it sounded different, or they'd give the shortened version of their name. So this all plays a part on a young person's mental health, this confidence. So I decided to add cultural awareness sessions. So here you can see it's our Look at Me jars, where we basically celebrate everything about us, our heritage, our culture. We used old jars, cloth, stickers, colours and pens to write in different languages. Young people made the jars to represent themselves. And then at the end, they just spoke confidently about their heritage, the languages they spoke, the food they ate at home. It was also very interesting for other students to learn about the different cultures in our society. Looking at the older groups, we were delivering mental health awareness sessions. They were delivered in secondary schools, youth clubs, community centres. We had workshops in terminology, signposting, social media, yoga, journaling, young people reflecting workshops. This involved sitting in front of a mirror and just talking about, qualities we liked about ourselves, physically as well as personally. This age group really seemed to struggle to speak about themselves confidently. I'm a qualified kids and teen yoga instructor, so it was, only natural to bring this in. And so I delivered sessions in schools as part of the feelings and mental health awareness sessions. Here is a class of 30 young pupils from Newport Primary. And then we've got a quote here from a young person. I feel more alive once I have meditated. I feel refreshed, like I just turned the computer off and on again, and it's working now. I also run an after-school club in Grangetown and run activities during holidays in our 4 areas around yoga and mindfulness, all around the topic of mental health. So our regular space, our drop-in was in Grangetown in the Boys and Girls Club. We named it our shed. I would be there one day and one evening a week for the young people to talk to, and also the parents if they wanted to. We have a gym in the Boys and Girls Town Club in Grangetown. So I used to run, and still do, sessions in the gym with the young people, and then also now we run for the young people's parents. I noticed a garden outside when we first arrived, looking a bit like a dumping ground. But with the help of Business in Wales, they recruited National Railway to volunteer, and they helped clear the garden. And then the youth workers and young people and local families got involved, and well, we have a pretty little garden. This garden now is being looked after and run by the community, and well, that's an amazing outcome. So the most successful in both projects, and this is running, is green prescription. We all know the benefits of being outside. Benefits of green prescription activities can ensure young people can get fit, active, and see places they wouldn't have otherwise seen or visited. Also providing knowledge of the importance of being active and going outside. The young people always came back positive, happy to have explored, and hugely tired after a good walk. Here we are in Devil's Bridge, Coldey Island, Mount Snowdon and Tenby. The bags are still in use, but now they're yellow, bright. Here we are, full of information and the young people's lunch, and also something to write on if they'd like to journal whilst they're out. They don't need to talk to me about anything. They just enjoy the outdoors. If they want to, they know I'm there. So here's a few quotes from our young people. I found it refreshing to leave the city and go out and experience nature with my own eyes. I had an amazing day. I never knew we had so many beautiful places near where I live. It's so nice to go out of my area, and I know now that going outside helps my mind and my body. Today, I instantly felt refreshed and my mind felt so clear. It's a different atmosphere and I had a great time, and I would love to come again. It was so great to come back as a family and watch them experience this area like I did. That was very special to me. And I think that's the best outcome for me, is knowing the seed is planted and they can come back with family and friends, breaking another barrier. Nature doesn't discriminate. It's for all of us to appreciate and, get out there and use. In the summer we visited Pembury Sands last year. Yeah, not that long after George Floyd's murder. As soon as we got there, my families realised they were the only ethnic people there. And it was so sad to see, because this fear kind of just ran through the group, and then no one wanted to leave the car park. We did, however, overcome this, and I got them out to the beach. I think the vast open space of Pembury Sands just helped everyone relax and have a good day. We have such wonderful spaces here in Wales, and we should all be comfortable enough to use them. Also, under the Green Prescription, we have taken young people to the theatre to help break barriers for young people attending the arts. Theatre is dominantly white, and this is definitely a barrier for ethnic families, not forgetting also the cost. Whenever we have the opportunity and receive a substantial discount to attend, we always fill the seats. And it's fantastic to see the young people who were apprehensive at first about going in, feeling out of their depth, and then coming out with such joy after experiencing a performance. It's always amazing to see. So our resources, again, our bags are there. We've got a pocket-sized leaflet, easy to pick up, it's discreet, put it away. And then I created a bookmark. It's just a well-being tool. The bookmark was developed during COVID, and everyone who participates in any of our sessions receives all three. Bookmark there is just to basically increase your breath, and the more you increase your out breath, the more relaxed you'll feel following the rainbow. So Hype and COVID. We moved online like everyone else. Our yoga was delivered online. We set up some Hype challenges. We had Hype Active, Hype Self-Care, Hype Creative, where they could take a pic of themselves doing it, or even what they've made, and send it to me. I didn't need to share if they didn't want to. And we had the Breathe Well challenge. So again, I just put out different breaths that they could learn to do. So some to calm yourself, some to invigorate, some to help with sleep. So the holistic activities online, the drawing, this one in the middle, if you can see it, the young person attended yoga online with myself, didn't speak about anything. He attended another activity, hadn't mentioned anything. And then when she did Hype Creative, she sent this image in. It's her drawing of her mobile phone, and she's just got lots of stars. And when we had a discussion, she basically was a victim of Islamophobia and racism, all via social media and texting. Many of the young people we worked with during lockdown unfortunately experienced this. We worked with many families who experienced this. Parents were contacting us. Our parents' one-to-ones increased because they were worried about the young person and the concerns the impact on lockdown had on them. So here's some of our young people who took part in children and young people's plan consultation. 3 of the young people involved in the consultation were then invited to meet the First Minister and Deputy Minister to launch a children and young people's plan. Amazing work done by them all. So what do young people think of Hype? If it were not for Hype, I would always just stare at my 4 walls. I like that I've been shown different places in Wales, and I hope in the future I can go back again. Hype has helped me to identify my own mental health issues, and I believe issues that have been in my family for generations. Hype has made it easy for me to deal with loss through meditations and listening to my thoughts. The social media sessions have made me really enjoy your workshops. The camera almost always lies. Yeah, so I just wanted to say thank you to everyone that's worked with us in our 4 areas. And yeah, I haven't got the schools, primary or secondary there, but yeah, thank you for all of them. And if anyone would like to work with Hype in the future, we can go in and deliver workshops in your schools. We can deliver drop-in sessions with your community groups, and we can work together on arranging a green prescription activity. So thank you very much for having me. Hope I've set with the time.
Zara, thank you so much. What a presentation. It was so rich and so full of creative ideas. And I think the comments in the chat really speak to everybody just being so impressed that a little bit of you goes such a long way across Wales. It's incredible. We haven't got an awful lot of time, but I know that there are a couple of hands up for questions for either you or for Alfred. So Martine, you've got your hand up.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll take my headphones off. Thank you for this afternoon, and what I'm taking and going to take forward, so as question and comment, is especially those last two sessions, I'm really, really heartened, because I work in education, to know that we are teaching the grown-ups about inclusion, active inclusion. So it's lovely that we're doing that, and we need to do more with all the grown-ups and making policy decisions, because in order for Zahara and Alfred to do their work, the grown-ups need to make things accessible. So as far as I can, when people are talking about mental health with the parents are saying that we're going to the doctors, but they just think I'm an angry black mummy. That's not good enough. So we need to make sure we educate the grown-ups and the children, because if we're talking about the rights approach, the children are well versed in that, but the grown-ups, in terms of policy, I don't think they are. So it's a rant and a question, and we'll be contacting the last two people to come to our schools, because we are next door, and I am so heartened to hear all the fabulous things, and I want to see them in the schools across Wales, and especially my authority in the Vale. So thank you, especially for those last two, because I think the children's rights approach, we need to be more active with it. We need to be much more active, and I want to make sure that we're not having the same conversation in 2-3 years' time. I want it to be different.
Martine,
sorry, rant's over.
Not at all. Thank you so much. So articulate in exactly what this is all about, and you're absolutely right. And one of our hopes is that this is a multi-layered approach, and the grown-ups and the policymakers it's got to start there. So we couldn't agree more. Thank you very much for making that comment so clearly. We've also got Lucy. You've got your hand up.
Thank you. Yeah, and thank you so much, Sarah, for a fantastic presentation. I know I'm putting you on the spot, but do you have any advice for us in Powys who have a very, very small ethnic minority population? So isolation as a group is also added to their problems. Any tips or advice for us here?
How are you working with them at the moment?
There's the educational welfare officers who work with specific groups in schools, and through anybody who has that sort of contact. But I'm just so aware that, particularly for the young people, they might be only 1 or 2 in a school, which is just very difficult for them then to find friends and a group like you are working with groups.
Well, we can always discuss this again and offline, and maybe come in if you'd like to do that, and then work together, or we can look at other organisations in your area. But I think it's just always making sure that everyone is seen.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you.
Okay. Alfred, do you want to come in?
It's just to complement the answer to that question. I think, like last week, our organization, we were in need because we got feedback from a school about an increase in student self-harming, and what we've been doing across South Wales, in Leeds, Swansea, Port Talbot area, is to have like a workshop sessions in schools in partnership with the school to deliver like a mental health awareness courses, short, fun for children and young people. And what we did last week was an eye opener, because we also have like the parent coming in along as well. And I noted, like, for example, some of the children were telling the mom, why didn't you, bring us to this session all this while? And that was because we were able to normalize mental health conversations. Like, I was able to share my experience around self-harming, for example, and the young people could connect and relate with that. Again, representation matters. And we're able to also inspire the parents around how to break down the stigma and have that right conversation with the with the children. So in answering that question that you asked, even though it wasn't directed at me, I think a series of workshops in partnership with the student, because it was a focus group, it wasn't for the entire school, it was for the students that were self-harming that the teachers got to know about, and then we brought them together and then normalized conversation around that. So I think that can work as well. I will be happy to work with you around in that area.
Thank you, Alfred. I think you're absolutely right that the more open conversations we have, the better, and the more included children feel, and the more visible that we all have mental health and we all have struggles, and that's a really important part of being a role model, isn't it? I'm just aware of the time. I know that people have hung on until 3 o'clock, so thank you very, very much. Can I just ask Emma, who's our visual illustrator, if she's able to share her screen, because she's been capturing today's event through a visual illustration, and hopefully it will kind of highlight the really important themes that we've talked about today. So oh, look at that, it's absolutely stunning. Thank you. So this will be available to share as part of capturing today. That's absolutely fantastic, Emma. Thank you. Okay, just 2 minutes over time. What's clear is that there is so much to talk about in this area and so much more work to do. So hopefully today has been a starting point for many, many more conversations to come. Can I thank all of our presenters? I think it's been a really fantastic afternoon, and look forward to being part of conversations in the future. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Hi Liz, it's me again.
Hiya.
Because I've got a meeting tomorrow, an All Wales meeting, an education one, I wanted to know